Islam doesn't mean peace. Islam actually means submission. The definition of God is that he's unlimited, is all powerful.
Do you think that there's a divine spark in human beings?
No, but we don't think there's any kind of divinity at all. Islam is categorical about this, because the way we define divinity is extremely strict. We say that the divine attributes of God are specific only to God. So nothing else.
What's the characteristic element of the human relationship with God?
So
and what's the central what would you say, structure of value within a human being that makes them worthy of respect, say, in the sight of God, or worthy of value in the sight of God?
The Quran states, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have dignified the child of Adam. So that we do believe in something called human exceptionalism. We do believe that human being has been specialized or specified among all other things in creation to be to have free will, for example, to have a personal relationship with God, to have a loving relationship with God. People don't realize this, especially from the Christian tradition, but one of the names of God from the Islamic tradition is that he's the loving one, Al-Wadud in Arabic, in the Quran as well. So we believe that the relationship that human beings should have with God is a loving relationship, but it's one of submission. This is the main thing. Islam doesn't mean peace. Islam actually means submission. Islam comes from the root Arabic word istislam, and what it means is submission. And really what the picture is in the Islamic cosmology is that everything in the universe is submitting to God. Everything, the laws of nature have been placed there by the lawmaker, which is God. And so we as human beings are volitional. We do believe in free will, but we also believe in a theological compatibilism. And so that a kind of predetermination is actually one of our pillars of faith, to believe in that. So in that sense, we have to voluntarily submit to God in the same way that everything else in creation is submitted.
And what does that submission mean?
What that means is that all the prophets and messengers came before time. So this is the meta-narrative of Islam. Abraham came, Moses came, Jesus came, and all of them came with exactly the same message. And that message is to worship, to believe in one God, and to worship in only one God. And to do that, you have to follow a guidance. So each and every single one of those messengers, they came with, we believe in our narrative, they came with two things effectively. They came with a message, which is to worship God, meaning to submit to his laws, and also with some kind of evidence base to suggest that they are prophets. So some of these stories would have been known, obviously, to you. You've done a biblical series, so I know you're very aware of those stories. We have very similar stories, like in Moses, Abraham, Jesus, but they are slightly different. Those stories are slightly different. In fact, sometimes radically different, especially considering some New Testament kind of narratives. And so what the thread that joins, or the flesh that joins all of these kind of messengers and prophets, is that they all came with one fundamental message, which is to believe in one God, worship one God. We believe that the Prophet Muhammad...
So hang on. I'm still not understanding this exactly.
Okay.
I'm not sure what you mean by believe. Like, the way you laid that out was, in some sense, propositional. Right? You made a logical argument for the existence of God, but you take the existence of God as given in some sense to begin with, because of your faith, and then you provide your belief with a rational argument, but it wasn't derived from a rational argument. And so when you talk about belief, do you mean belief in a set of propositions about the nature of God? And if you do or don't, what do you believe, and how would you separate out that belief from what you term as worship?
Right. So actually, there's one thing that ought to be known, that in Islamic theology, we believe in something called the fitrah, which is an innate instinct to believing in God. And now, I'm not sure if you're aware of the work on it.
So why bother with the propositional arguments then? To me, they just seem like a side venture, to argue with scientists.
Some scholars have said that in Islam. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah. Okay. No.
In fact, some modern day philosophers of religion have that kind of a stance, like Alvin Plantinga. He seems quite, agnostic about the whole thing. I mean, the thing is, what we're saying is, it would be committing something like the naturalistic fallacy to suggest that just because something is the case, or there is ought fallacy maybe, just because something is the case, that it ought to be the case. So in order to prove it's a demonstrative proof for those who are in what we call shak or doubt. And but the truth is, as you've mentioned, and as in the literature, like for example, Justin Barrett has this in his cognitive psychological or cognitive science literature. I'm not sure if you've come across his stuff, but basically, basically what he says is that we have an innate, his words exactly, receptivity to believing in God. In 2011, the Oxford Anthropological Society, they done a huge study of 32,000 children, and what they found was that children innately and intuitively, instinctively have a belief of a higher power of some sort. Now they're born with that belief, and in fact, in one of the papers in Justin Barrett's book, he literally mentions the fitrah, or the Islamic theological concept of an instinct in believing in God.
Mm-hmm. And then the submission idea. What exactly? I mean, God is ineffable in a sense, and so what does submission mean exactly?
Right.
And how is that related to worship? And how is that related to the good, let's say, on a practical level?
Right. So I think what you said before, there was a point you made about defining faith through action. And I think that we would strongly agree with that. And that's what we believe. Our definition of faith is what you basically believe in the heart, say on the tongue, and do with your actions. That's like a definition of faith for us, or iman, the idea of iman. In terms of the good, now there are different conceptions in Islam of the good, but the main thing is we believe that God is good, quite similar to what Christians believe, and therefore he wants good for human beings, and that the injunctions of God are also good. In terms of submission, and this is extremely important here, submission can only be done through revelation. That is our position. The position is that submission is actually impossible without a guidance, and the guidance we believe obviously is the Quran, but we also acknowledge the Torah, the original Torah that was sent to Moses, and the original Injil, or the gospel that was sent to Jesus. But what we have is, you can call it a doctrine of tahrif, which means corruption. So what we believe is that what happened is, with these books, you've had basically corruption happen to them. So we don't know what is part of that book and what is not part of that book. We don't know exactly what Jesus said and what isn't, because there is no clear chain of narration back to Jesus Christ. But going back to the point of submission is to follow the prophets, all of them, because a Muslim cannot be a Muslim unless they believe in, revere, love, and respect all of the prophets, including Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and all of them. Follow all of them and in their way. And once again, we believe that they were divinely inspired. So, and there is evidence that all of these prophets come with. And I think I was on that point when I was telling you that the differentiating factor between the Prophet Muhammad and the rest of the prophets is, we believe, whereas all of the other prophets came for their people and their time, we believe that Muhammad came for all people and all times.